Welcome back to the most accurate podcast here at 4 for 4 Football. As always, I'm your host, John Daigle, here for the Week 16, and most likely for a lot of you, semifinals waiver wire preview show. As always, the waiver wire is available at 44.com by Monday afternoon, and if you tune in this week, you will see that it is none other than Zamir White as the cover image for this week's waiver wire column. And perhaps Josh Jacobs returns from his knee injury and spoils this one overall and forces us to instead pick up another player altogether. But right now, White is the preferred target because even in that 42-point blowout against the Chargers on Thursday night, where White out-touched Amir Abdullah 20-8, if you step back and look at the first half only, while the Raiders were still building that massive lead over Los Angeles, White still was used over Abdullah, out carrying him 8-4 and running 14 routes to his 7. Not only that, but White handled the team's only running back touches, all 3 of them inside the red zone. So if Jacobs were to miss one more game, White would again be a serviceable every down RB2 against this Chiefs defense that out of their bye have allowed the 7th most yards per carry to opposing running backs. A thinner option, but someone I want to continue us being ahead of, is Chase Brown. Because right now, Chase Brown isn't necessarily usable for fantasy. He's only averaging 10 touches per game these last 3 weeks. But he's clearly made enough of a dent to be a nuisance to Joe Mixon, who has handled a season-low share of backfield touches in 3 consecutive games. The only thing is, Mixon is masking that underwhelming usage due to touchdowns. 4 of them, in fact, because he's out-touched Chase Brown 10-0 inside the 5-yard line these last 3 weeks. But there could be a passing of the torch coming along, because even this last game, with Brown being injured and exiting for a handful of possessions, he handled a season-high 40% share of Cincinnati's backfield touches. So given his explosiveness, if we think there's even one iota of a chance of Brown's workload continuing to increase ahead of this next game, we want to be ahead of Brown also for the Fantasy Championship, just in case he does become flexible in that time. And to quickly wrap up running backs, I don't think we're going to get either Tyler Godson or Trey Sermon in this upcoming game against the Falcons because Adam Schefter reported that Zach Moss will, quote, try to play, unquote, against the Falcons, and Jonathan Taylor is reportedly feeling good and may return to practice this week. If, however, both those players sit for Indianapolis, I do want to be clear that Godson, not Trey Sermon, is the player we are picking up as the Colts starter because Godson quietly out-touched Sermon 8-2, including a 31-yard run and negated goal line touchdown due to a penalty on offense before the Colts took a 24-13 lead. And only when the Colts took that lead did Sermon out-carry Godson 15-5 the rest of the way as the Colts kicked 3 more field goals and killed the clock to get out of that game against Mitch Trubisky. But Godson, who still earned 2 targets to Sermon's 0 in that one, is clearly the player to prioritize if both Moss and Taylor miss the game. For wide receivers, however, if you're in no need of a running back for Week 16, I think Josh Palmer is our number 1 pickup because there was a lot of meat left on the bone admittedly with Palmer returning on Thursday night without Keenan Allen. Only a 12.9% target share, and a majority of his production, 70 yards and a touchdown, came on a broken coverage from the Raiders when the Chargers were already trailing by 49 points. But I'm looking at what happened behind the scenes because Palmer was a full-time player, starting in 2 wide sets and running just 2 fewer routes than Quentin Johnston for an 84% route participation on Easton 6 dropbacks. Given that the Chargers are allowing the 7th highest rate of explosive passes this year and have no chance at stopping Josh Allen in that passing game, we think there's going to be voluminous opportunity for everyone in the Chargers passing game, Josh Palmer included. So if that's the case, I'm taking Palmer's negative game script and his opportunity through the air as the best receiver pickup and start of the week. The next one would be Noah Brown, because we knew someone had to step up in place of both Tank Dell out for the year with a broken leg, and Nico Collins, who suffered a calf injury. And maybe Collins returns this next game against Cleveland. But we always expected it would be Brown despite his egg in the box score in 2 consecutive games because Brown had already popped for 2 top 6 finishes earlier this year. And that's exactly what happened from Case Keenum, as Brown earned a team-high 32.3% target share and finishes the overall wide receiver 9 in Week 15 against the Titans. Regardless of Nico's status for this upcoming week, if CJ Stroud is back from the concussion protocol, Brown is clearly the team's wide receiver 2 and should be treated as such even in a tougher matchup because Stroud has proven he can elevate everyone on that offense regardless of the matchup. And finally, because Tyler Boyd is still lingering out there in some leagues, the current reports per Fox's Jay Glazer is that Jamar Chase is expected to miss some time. And if that's the case, we haven't seen Jamar Chase miss a game yet this year, but we did see Boyd in 4 games without T. Higgins. And in those games, he averaged a 21% target share and 10 fantasy points per game. Not only that, but once Chase exited the field on Saturday, both Boyd and Higgins were targeted on 25% of Browning's attempts the rest of the way. So Boyd should definitely be in our player pools to pick up if we are desperate to pad for injuries this week as well. And one last thing before we get out of here, because I understand all of you are continuing to go through quarterback injuries and having to stream players. And if you are in that position yet again, the top streamer this week is none other than Joe Flacco. Because not only is Flacco getting the volume all of a sudden and 3 starts in Cleveland, seeing at least 44 pass attempts in all 3 games, but also with the Browns engineering the 9th highest pass play rate from neutral game script in that time, it's clear that Flacco is also delivering on that volume with QB 13, QB 6, and QB 7 finishes so far in that stretch. Not only that, but it's an amazing spot against the Texans secondary because, yes, the Texans contained Will Levis and the Titans passing game. But remember, from week 10 on, prior to Levis' start, the Texans secondary completely collapsed for 8.2 yards per attempt and 19.2 fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. Flacco this week, if you're struggling for injuries, is the best streaming option available in 75% of Yahoo leagues. We will be back for championship week waiver wires next week. Until then, good luck, and remember, be a little bit kinder than what's required. We'll see you next time.